Okay, we're going to take a look at some more punctuation marks. We're going to take a look at 3 this time. We're going to look at the colon, the semicolon, and the dash. Let's start with the colon. It looks like this. 2 dots. The colon signals to the reader that a list, quotation, or explanation will follow. The key word when thinking about a colon is anticipation. Whatever is on the left side of the colon creates anticipation. The colon tells the reader, yep, that's what you're supposed to be feeling, anticipation, here we come. And then the right side resolves that feeling of anticipation. So what does that mean? Well, let's look at that first use. Use a colon before a list of items. So here's the left side of the quotation. Haley went to the store and bought 3 items. Well, that makes the reader want to know what the 3 items are. The colon makes that clear, that yes, you should be wondering what those 3 things are, and I'm about to tell you. And then the right side resolves that anticipation by telling the reader what the 3 items are. But the colon makes it clear that that's what the reader is supposed to feel. When the reader sees a colon, they know, okay, so I'm about to get this information. I can anticipate that I'm about to get the information I was just told about. Another use of a colon, use it before a quotation. For instance, Albert Einstein scoffed at the notion of his genius, colon, I have no special talents, I am only passionately curious. So, again, even though it's being used differently, because in this case it's introducing a quote, there's still that anticipation, because Albert Einstein scoffed at the notion of his genius. Then this tells us that we're about to see him do it. And then the quote, he does it. So the anticipation is resolved. Colon use number 3. Use a colon between independent clauses when the second clause explains the first. So here's the left side of the colon. Gerald realized his mistake too late, colon. The colon tells the reader, you're about to find out what that mistake was. And then the right side, he failed to study for the English quiz and would now fail miserably. So the right side resolves the left side by telling us what the mistake was. So it explains it. Next, we have the semicolon. The semicolon looks like this. So whereas the colon had 2 dots, the semicolon has a dot and a comma at the bottom. And whereas the full colon carried anticipation with it, the semicolon is completely neutral. It doesn't have any emotion attached to it whatsoever. It is completely functional. So a semicolon connects 2 independent clauses in one sentence. It indicates that the 2 ideas are closely related. So in other words, you use a semicolon when you've got 2 ideas, but you want the reader to see that they're so related that they're in one sentence. They could be sentences by themselves, but you want to indicate to the reader that I want you to see these 2 things as one thing. So for example, Jimmy broke his brother's arm, semicolon. It wasn't an accident. Or Chris's room looks disgusting. It smells even worse. So these ideas are so related that as the writer, I wanted you to see them as connected more than you would see if they were 2 separate sentences. The sushi is delicious. I'll have another piece. It doesn't indicate any kind of emotional connection between the 2. It just says these 2 ideas are very related. Even though they're complete by themselves, I want you to see them as one thing. Another thing you can use a semicolon for is to link 2 independent clauses joined by phrases like furthermore or however, nevertheless, therefore, for example, or besides. So a lot of times you'll see people write a sentence and then they'll have a comma and use however like it's a conjunction, but however is not a conjunction. So you need a semicolon here to indicate that that is an independent clause, and then this is an independent clause, and the semicolon is strong enough to separate 2 independent clauses. Here's some examples. The snow looks pretty. However, it makes driving difficult. I read the chapter closely. Therefore, I should do well on the quiz. If this was a comma, that would be a run-on sentence, because you cannot link two independent clauses with just a comma. So that needs to be a semicolon. Last one, the sun is shining. Nevertheless, it's cold outside. So when you're using one of these words to transition to a new idea, you got to use a semicolon. And the last punctuation mark is the dash. The dash looks like that. Now, we can get confused sometimes when you've got hyphens, N dashes, and M dashes. They're different lengths. Hyphens are used to connect two words to make one word, like high quality. That is a high quality instrument right there. The N dash, they call it an N dash because it's exactly the length of a capital N. An N dash is used for instance, years. So 1996 through 1998. That should be an N dash. This is called an M dash. That's what we're talking. That's the thing that separates ideas. So, a dash is used to indicate that an explanation will follow. Example, Josh joined ballet for one reason and one reason only. Girls in tutus. Now, you might ask, couldn't I just use a colon here? Doesn't this create anticipation similar to the way the colon does? Yeah, you could use either a colon or a dash here. The difference is the dash looks a little more dramatic on the page. Second example, I'm not going outside, it's pouring rain. Again, the dash is a little more dramatic. It separates the two ideas. It's sort of emphatic explanation of why we're not going outside. So there's a little more oomph to a dash than there is to a colon. One way you can think about a dash being used in this way is that it can stand in for the phrase, that is to say, so Josh joined ballet for one reason and one reason only. That is to say, girls in tutus. Dash use number 2. It can separate parenthetical, which means unnecessary, information from the rest of the sentence. So very few reality shows, none really, are any good. Well, I must have wrote this before I watched British Bake Off, because that's really good. Second example, I strolled down the quiet hall. It was during third period, and I heard shouting in the bathroom. So in both these cases, you can see that I don't really need this information. The sentence would be just fine without it. But if I feel like I want to add clarifying information into the middle of a sentence, I can use dashes to separate that out from the main part of the sentence. Lastly, a dash can indicate an abrupt break in thought. This is usually used in fiction. You see it a lot of times in novels. For example, hey, where did the puppy... There she is! Like, this indicates I'm breaking off this thought and going into a new thought. Same thing down here. At the end of the movie, the murderer turns out to be, but I don't want to spoil it for you. So this indicates I'm cutting off this idea and starting a new idea. And that's it for colons, semicolons, and dashes. Mindeman out.